you want to start is good.
All right, yeah.
And then if you just want to play like, I don't know, 30 seconds of something.
Sure.
And then.
Yeah. All right. So this is for Alex. So I'm not sure what I should play. Okay. Well, I'll try to play like a jazz thing, just because that's probably what we'll talk about. Yes, this is like an old ballad. So. Oh, I have to try that again. Sorry. Yeah, there you go.
Crazy.
I think I played a few wrong notes in there, but Alex will get a kick out of it. So.
Yeah. I mean, to me it sounds amazing.
Oh, great.
So.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess I'll start off by saying, is jazz your main style? Yeah.
So jazz, I mean, I would say for trombone, that's, there aren't a lot of styles that sort of incorporate that instrument. So jazz in sort of our country's history is probably the main genre for that instrument.
Okay.
So there is some like Western classical stuff too, but yeah.
All right. Do you think that you fit the stereotype of your genre?
That's a good question. Depends on what era. Like, I don't fit like the old stereotype of a jazz musician, because probably like 40 or 50 years ago, that probably included a lot of like, substances and, but also like touring, like jazz was a lot more popular in like the 1930s and 40s and 50s. And so I don't think there was a lot of jazz happening like in schools and colleges. So, but a more recent stereotype probably, I think most jazz musicians today are either teaching half-time, part-time, or full-time, and it's not as popular of music. So I think we find ourselves in different settings. Yeah.
All right. When were you first introduced to your instrument?
Back middle school. So like there's a middle school band program where I went to school. So like 4th grade, I think. Yeah.
And you chose the.
Yeah, the band director sort of needed trombones, so he kind of forced it on me. But the band director at that school knew my mom really well, because my mom was a teacher in the school. And he basically like sort of forced her to force it on me, and I was not thrilled with it at first, but eventually, like, it took a long time, but eventually I started to like it.
And you've been doing it since then?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I went in and out sort of early on, but by high school I was pretty committed to it,
All right.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about quitting?
Early on, yeah, for sure. In fact, I tried a few times to quit. My mom didn't let me, but yeah, the first few years it was like,
Yeah, I played the saxophone for like 2 years, and
I
could. And my sister played all through high school, and
yeah.
I feel like my mom was like, "Why can't you do it?" It was not for me. I am not very musically talented.
Well, it's not really fun early on too. I mean, a lot of things with like wind instruments is that it takes a long time to get even remotely comfortable on it. Like piano can give you sort of an instant gratification once you learn a few things.
Yeah.
But an instrument like that, it really is like a long time before you feel good at all making any sound on it.
Right.
So it's really hard to stick with it. So I think there's a high quit rate for wind instruments in general.
Definitely, because your eyes sounded terrible. So bad.
No, I did too. Yeah.
Did you have like a mentor? So when you first started, you had like a mentor?
Yeah, my middle school band director, so the same person that sort of introduced me to it. He was a really charismatic figure. He was really involved with my whole education, because even when I went to high school, he had a band that I actually worked with and played with, and my first job was setting up for that band. I would set up like the speakers and the microphones and stuff. So yeah, he was really a figure in my life all the way through college, really.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Has music affected your relationships? So I guess that's personal, or I guess social, in any way.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, relationships are really important in music. I think it's one of the reasons why I started to care about music was I liked the people that played.
Yeah.
And so it was a way to sort of hang out with people that I liked a lot, because I was really into sports before I got into music, and I didn't dislike those people, but I was sort of drawn to the community that music represented.
Right.
And then like beyond that, all my close friends are musicians, and my wife's a musician, so I think it becomes sort of its own little environment that you kind of exist in, for sure.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
Let's see. What aspect do you find most fulfilling?
About playing music?
Yeah, about being a musician or
sure,
your
like what part of it?
instrument itself.
That's a good question. I mean, definitely doing my own thing. Like, it's not something I get to do very often because I'll say the instrument itself is sort of a side person instrument. You tend to be in other people's bands more than your own thing. But when I do get the rare opportunity to like play the music I've written, perform it live, that's very fulfilling. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's fun.
So you write your own music?
Yeah. I used to do it more, but I still write my own music, yeah. But like I said, there's not a ton of forums for it nowadays, so it ends up being like, a few times a year I might be able to play my actual stuff with like my band, but yeah.
So you're in a band still?
Yeah, I'm in a lot of different groups. I mean, my own thing is just sort of my friends that, we play collectively when we have the opportunity.
So you play more for like enjoyment now than you do for necessarily?
I mean, I still consider, I still play professionally. It's not how this is, I'm more of a teacher.
Job,
So there's, if I really wanted to perform full time, you probably have to live in like a city like New York.
Right.
It's tougher when you get further out of like a major city because there's just not a lot of gigs and a lot of performances.
Okay.
But I, gig here and there. Still.
All right.
Yeah.
I guess I go from that. So where have you played or performed, like anywhere special, and what was your favorite like venue or concert, show, anything that is there one that like sticks out to you the most?
Sure. I mean, I've played a lot of places. I mean, just in terms of like a venue, how beautiful it is playing. I played at Symphony Hall in Boston, which is just it's like a really old building. I think it's, how old is it? It's over 100 years old, and it's just acoustically just like really nice. So to play on the stage there was really, really awesome. But the concert itself was sort of lame. I guess the most fun I ever had concert-wise, I lived in Miami for 4 or 5 years, and there's actually another sort of symphony hall, New World Symphony down there on Miami Beach. It's a beautiful venue, and I did some cool concerts there with some artists. One, I guess, was with Gloria Estefan. I'm not sure if she's before your time.
The one who did Conga.
Conga.
I love that song.
We actually didn't do that song. It was her doing like jazz standards. It was kind of funny, but it was actually a really fun concert. So yeah.
Oh, so were you in Miami for music, or you were there for something
else?
else?
I was there to actually get my last degree, so my doctoral degree at the University of Miami. But that was in music, and I was playing a lot down there at the time. Was
there ever a time that you wanted to solely pursue music?
Just playing and not teaching? Kind of not really. I think I was always realistic that, if this was the instrument I was going to choose, that it's pretty rare to just play a trombone and make a living off of it. Not to say that it doesn't exist. People do it, but you're doing some balance of playing and teaching, no matter like where you are on that spectrum.
Right.
So the more I taught, I just got more inclined to want to teach more. So it just became sort of a natural pull towards that side of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What is the biggest challenge that you have faced?
Like in music?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think just, on the instrument, it's a challenging instrument. And I think it's funny, when I went down to Miami, probably my first year down there, I was really struggling with it. It's just, I had hit like sort of a creative rut. I wasn't writing music anymore. I was feeling kind of stagnant on the instrument too. And I kind of hit like a brick wall. And it just felt like, man, like this is hard, like when's this going to get easier? And at that point too, I was probably in my mid to late 20s, so it just felt like it should be easy at this point. So that felt like a real sort of hard place. But luckily I was in a good environment that over a couple of years it kind of got better, and I started to get momentum again. That's probably professionally the hardest stretch though. It wasn't like when you're not getting a lot of when new opportunities aren't sort of presenting themselves and you feel kind of stuck in one place, it can get kind of like, because it's not a very rewarding thing if you're not actually experiencing some positive feedback, so when you're just kind of like locked in a room practicing and not liking how it sounds, in your mid-20s feels like kind of depressing. But I was not able to kind of push through that over a few years.
So knowing what you know now, would you like recommend young kids to play an instrument or start an instrument?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I'd recommend. I would recommend this only to very specific people. But instruments in general, absolutely. I think music is just it's a really great thing to have in your life, and to like be able to express yourself, sort of not just through words but through something else is a really important thing. And to find kind of like a home and community through music can be really great. So I think there's a lot to be gained from just playing any instrument.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I played one, because I feel like you can be a musician your whole life. You can't be an athlete your entire life.
True,
I mean, I
To a
guess you
point.
could,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? You can, and when you're 85 years old, you can still be doing
No,
your
absolutely.
thing.
I think people, it don't have to be a professional level, but like
Right.
just to have a thing you do every day or every few days, just it kind of gets you in your own world and kind of chills
Yeah.
you out. I know a lot of students that I know that, they're not majoring, there's no music major here, so they're not majoring in music, but they like the process of coming down here and just playing their instrument alone and sort of what that does for them just mentally every
Right.
day, So I think it's a really good sort of, almost like a Zen little thing where you kind of have your own space with music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me see. I have a bunch of questions that I'm just thinking of now, but
Sure.
I wrote a ton down.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that today, like in today's world, music is more important to people than it was in the past?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, why? And if not, why?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, it's really complicated. I think it's, I would say it's probably not as important or valuable today because we have so much of it. It's so easy to access music, and people don't, you don't need to create music to access it,
Right.
Whereas there was a long time in human history where you did,
Yeah.
before recordings and stuff. If you didn't create your own music, you wouldn't hear it. I think the power that music had when it was something you could only do with your family or people in your community, like in church or something, it was like a really powerful thing. Like it was a really special thing to hear music.
Right.
Whereas it's great that we have so much access to it now, but I think it's kind of maybe watered down the experience of hearing it and what it might mean in someone's life.
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, people can access it in so many amazing ways that it's still, I think, a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
It's just a very different relationship. Yeah.
I have like a follow-up question was,
Sure.
do you think media and apps such as like Spotify have been positive or negative?
Yeah. Again, yeah, it's the same thing. I yes and no. I think it's
Yeah.
great that we can access all that music. That's
Yeah.
incredible. If you were to tell me, even it's funny, it's my lifetime that when I was born, that none of that existed.
Right.
I had to actually go to record stores and CD stores to buy CDs, and they cost a lot of money. And you had a very narrow sort of picture of music. Now you can just access anything at any time, which is really incredible. But I do think there's sort of a downside to it. I think that, being forced to just listen to one thing that you spent $15 on and listen to the whole album, and even if you don't like all of it at first, is actually a cool thing that it sort of forces you to open your ears up a bit and you develop more of a relationship to that thing, Whereas when music just kind of washes over you so easily, I don't know if we connect to it as deeply sometimes.
Yeah, I can skip a song.
Yeah.
I always because record players and stuff, I feel like we're my generation, we're amazed by them, and I love when someone will put it on and I'm oh, it's so cool, but to us it's nothing.
Yeah.
I can play whatever I want whenever I want.
No, sure. And I read something the other day where there was a poll, and people were asked to name their favorite song, and a lot of people, I guess, could name the name of their favorite song, but had no idea who made it, didn't know the artist behind it, because you're so used to just listening to the song and actually having no idea where it came from. And I think that's I think it's really great to know who creates it and develop sort of relationships kind of with the artists that create music. And I think when you lose that, and we might go back there. I think eventually there might be a different version of what we're doing now that's more maybe modeled on the past, but we're in sort of an interesting place right now.
Yeah, my dad will ask me all the time. I'll know every word to a song.
Yeah.
You know who wrote this? I'm I have
exactly.
no idea.
Because it's not there. You just see the name of the song. Whereas when you bought a record, you had all the information and in liner notes and lyrics. You had all this information that you can kind of process as part of the experience.
And you pick the artists you want to listen to the most because you're buying an album.
You have to really invest money in it. So,
I have playlists that are anywhere from literally Bob Marley to Katy Perry, such different things. Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
This is kind of out of music, but interesting. If you weren't a musician, what would you be, or what would you do in means of artistic expression? So if you couldn't have music, do you think that there would be some way in which you would?
Interesting. Yeah. I always like to write. I think maybe I'd be more into writing. But it's tough because I really connected with it early on. even before I liked that instrument, I really was into music and just listening to it. So it was something that really did connect with me. But yeah, maybe writing. I was never a visual artist. I'm just terrible. So I don't know if that would ever have really connected, but maybe writing, long form, yeah.
Do you like sing, or did you ever perform in like musicals?
No, I was singing. I think I did like a musical thing when I was really young. It was horrible, yeah.
No singing?
None. Yeah, it's really,
okay.
It's for everybody's good.
I would love to be able to sing. If I
could
sing,
me too. Yeah.
Oh, it'd be so nice. I have another one that's kind of, if money wasn't a factor, so like it didn't matter upon money, if like it was not even a thing, what would you be doing right now? So like music-wise, your career-wise, would you be doing what you're doing, or would you be doing something totally different?
No, I wouldn't be totally different. I mean, if money was like not a factor at all, I'd probably be playing more than teaching, just because I think there is that balance. But I would still be teaching. It's just I think it's tough to play too. For me, the big financial inhibitor was always New York, because I felt like I always wanted to live in New York, because that's a place where you can play and create a lot with a lot of great musicians. But it's so expensive to live there. So it was always like this hurdle that I never really jumped over. So I think, going back, if money was never an issue in my life, I probably would have spent more time in New York and lived there for a stretch and just try to get into the scene there a bit more.
And you'd be just playing more.
Playing more, kind of involved with. There's a lot of venues there that still have great live music, despite the fact it's so expensive to live there. So musicians do tough it out. They figure out ways. They live like way up, like in outside Brooklyn and stuff, but. That would be maybe the one thing I would have done differently.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there was like a place you could go, I know that you said New York, but is there anywhere else in the world where like you would like to go to like learn or about your music or express more of your music?
Yeah, I mean, I've been there a few times, New Orleans, but if I could like live in New Orleans, that would be great, because New Orleans is where all that comes from, sort of the historical thing, and there's just so much great music there still to this day, and there's just so much history there. I would love to,
And New Orleans is jazz.
Yeah, it's where jazz comes from, but it's also like it's just sort of the crossroads of a lot of different things. A lot of Caribbean music in New Orleans, a lot of like brass music specifically that kind of has its start there. So it's just there's a lot there. It's a very almost very European city, because I think it was because of French colony for so long. So there's a lot of like symphonic music there. It's just a really cool place. And the few times I've been there for like a week here, a week there, I always wanted to stay a lot longer. Yeah.
And you would bring your like instrument when you
I mean, there's a lot of performance things I've been able to do there very briefly, and so I've been able to take my instrument down. But the way that music is still just such a part of the culture there is great. Like, have you been to New Orleans?
No.
So if you go there, I mean, you'll see street music. It's just everywhere. Brass bands just marching down the street all the time. It's like it's never like a celebration. It's just always happening.
Yeah.
And we think of Mardi Gras because it's like a holiday, but it's kind of like that all the time, just without the costumes. There's always like music out there, and it's just very ingrained in the culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool, because I think in most places, even New York, we tend to put the music in like the clubs, and it's like sort of separated from everyday life, whereas New Orleans is just like it's always time for music, and it's just very much like everywhere. It's very cool. So.
Well, is there a like specific cultural of music that you focus on when you were playing? Like, is there one background that you like really found interesting that you was like inspired a lot of what you would play?
So like cultural.
Just kind of like just like a type of I don't know. Like, I know that you're saying like there's a lot of background in there, but a lot of people, like, if they choose to play like a certain instrument, they're inspired by like the French artists. Like,
sure.
Like stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, well, jazz itself is its own sort of cultural thing. It's really an American, sort of African American story, really starting in New Orleans. So the musicians that I really draw from have been like jazz musicians like Miles Davis or Louis Armstrong or John Coltrane. So like they're pretty specific narrative there, culturally speaking. So I think it's sort of the African American musical sort of history that is really fascinating.
Okay, let me see. I have a couple more. So how many? Well, I should ask you this in the beginning, but how many years have you been playing in total, would you say?
That's a good question. I guess at this point it's been either it's 20 or just short of 20 years. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a long time, yeah.
Oh my god. That's crazy. And then I just have one more that I can't find. Oh. So when you play, do you feel like you kind of have a different persona than who you are in like your everyday life?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, maybe a little bit, because you have to be a little bit more out there when you play, because you're exposing yourself. So it is sort of a performative thing, and I probably am not that way in sort of everyday life.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to slightly kind of turn it up a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's not a huge departure, I don't think, from who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like hold more confidence, I guess, when you
Yeah,
play?
you have to be like head up, chest
Yeah.
up, and you have to really kind of put yourself out there, because I think we all see performers sometimes that kind of do this, and it turns us off, even if
Right.
they're playing great music. It just, if you don't see the charisma on stage, it can kind of
Right.
take away from the performance. So yeah, you have to kind of like amp it up a bit, even when you're playing like jazz or classical. you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Well, definitely.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that it's, I mean, if you're just sitting there like.
Yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
yeah.
I've seen great shows where people are just kind of slouching and not into it, and you fall asleep just because you take so much from body language. So.
Yeah, even
Yeah.
when we watch things in class, like she
Mhm.
would have videos on like
Oh,
the
yeah.
projector,
Mhm.
and I would always be way more interested when like the musician seemed super into what they were
Yeah,
doing and they
yeah.
were very confident about
Sure.
it. Yeah.
No, it's a big part of it, and they don't actually teach you that very much too. I think it's something that you just have to pick up on, but we tend not to emphasize that when we teach music. But
Right.
yeah, you have to like sell it, even if it's like serious stuff. Like I think we only think the entertainers entertain, but even serious music, you have
Right.
to entertain. You have to like, certainly connect with an audience. You know.
Yeah, and we did a lot on like I guess like political protests,
Yep.
like stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Sure.
And like all those people were very like they connected with the audience,
Mhm.
because if you don't connect with the audience, there's no way in which you can like
Yeah.
kind of really like bring everyone up and understand what you're trying to.
Yeah, you're not gonna inspire people if you're not like
Yeah.
selling it and not like really committing and eye contact and
Yeah.
it's a lot of
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah. Mhm.
That's awesome. I would really wish that I did music, but
I mean,
maybe I
never
will.
too late. Yeah,
I
never
have
too
time
late.
off.
Yeah, right. I mean, I will
Yeah.
say singing, if that's the thing you're interested in the most. I mean,
Yeah.
that's something you can always pick up. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's we can
I'd
all
love
sing.
to play guitar too.
Sure.
I feel like guitar is very like versatile. You can do it
Mhm.
anywhere with anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Portable. You can play any different style with it. And,
Definitely not
guitar is
as
great.
specialized.
Yeah, that's
But-
very niche. Like
Yeah.
there's only certain things you can do with that. But yeah, guitar fits into anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, any song. Yeah.
Maybe I'll do it. I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, never too late.
Alright, I think that's it. I
Cool.
think I don't know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all I had to do.
Awesome.
Alright.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good questions. Yeah. Made me
Thanks,
think about
Brian.
stuff.
I know. Maybe you'll think about it.
Yeah. Good luck with
Awesome.
this.
Thank
Yeah.